I still remember the moment the world went blurry, not from tears, but from the shock of my husband snapping his fingers at security and ordering them to remove the problem. The problem was me, his wife of 3 years. As they dragged me across the polished hallway, guests whispered, phones flashed, and my husband smirked like he'd finally taken out the trash. But what he didn't know, every chandelier above his head, every acre of land he bragged about, every stone in that mansion he claimed he built belonged to my father, and the clock had already started ticking on his downfall. My name is Lena Hale, and this is the story of how my husband tried to bury me, not knowing I owned the shovel. The moment I stepped into that grand hall, I should have known something was off. The chandeliers glistened above, crystal droplets catching the light, but my stomach was twisting like I had swallowed a live snake. My husband, Adrian Wolfe, stood at the center with that smug, untouchable smile. He looked like he owned the world, and tonight, apparently, he thought he owned me. It all started with a casual toast. To Adrian and Lena, a night to celebrate success and partnership. Someone clinked glasses. I smiled, forced, and took a sip. But then came the whispers, subtle at first, then louder. I caught Serena Vale leaning against the doorway, smirking. She wasn't just there for the charity gala, she was here to humiliate me. My chest tightened. Adrian raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement." His voice was calm, deliberate, the kind that made the air feel sharp. I straightened, expecting maybe a business reveal or a toast. Instead, he smiled at me. That same sick, twisted smile he had when he had the upper hand. "You've all witnessed the generosity of my household," he said, glancing at the staff with thinly veiled superiority. "But unfortunately, my wife, Lena, has proven herself unworthy of the title she carries." Time slowed. Before I could react, security appeared. 2 massive men materialized from behind the curtains, their hands gripping my arms. "Excuse me, ma'am," one said, polite but firm. "We need you to step aside." "Step aside?" I whispered. "What are you doing? Adrian, stop this." But he didn't. He watched, champagne in hand, as they escorted me down the polished marble hallway. The guests were laughing quietly, phones flashing, recording every humiliating second. Serena's laugh, a high-pitched, cruel melody, echoed behind me as they shoved me out of the grand room. I stumbled onto the driveway, the night air hitting me like ice. My suitcase barely had my essentials, the one thing I could grab in the chaos. And then the gates slammed behind me with a clang that sounded like a prison door. I was alone, completely exposed. It rained. Of course it did. My heels sank into puddles, water soaking my dress, mixing with tears I hadn't yet had the courage to release. My phone vibrated, a message from my father. I stared at it, hands trembling. One simple line. "Come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Sharp. Bring nothing but yourself." I looked at the mansion one last time, lights glowing inside, laughter echoing faintly. Little did Adrian know, that house, every inch of it, was not his. And I was about to prove it. 3 years earlier, my life was simple, maybe even boring. I was 25, teaching English at a small public school, living in a cramped apartment with peeling wallpaper and a tiny balcony that barely held my potted plants. I didn't have much, but it was mine, and I liked it that way. Stability, routine, quiet nights with a book and tea. That was my world, until Adrian Wolfe walked in. I met him at a charity gala my friend dragged me to. He was impossible to ignore. Tall, confident, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed money and influence. He smiled across the room, that dazzling, effortless smile, and somehow made it feel like the entire room disappeared. I had no idea a single conversation could make my heart race like that. He moved fast. Within a month, he was at my apartment, taking me on helicopter rides, introducing me to people I didn't even know existed, and whispering, "I've been waiting for someone like you my whole life." I'll admit it, I was swept away. There was excitement, danger, and allure in every word he said. My friends warned me about love bombing, but I ignored them. They didn't see the way he looked at me or how the world seemed to pause whenever he smiled. 6 months later, he proposed with a ring that could buy a small car. My apartment walls had never felt so small, my life so ordinary, but I said yes, thinking I'd finally stepped into the life I dreamed of. The wedding was extravagant, far beyond what I had imagined. White roses lined every aisle, a 7-tier cake stood tall in the center, and more than 200 people attended. My father, Henry Hale, came in his modest suit, quietly observing. He had raised me alone after my mother passed away when I was 14. He was simple, humble, a man of quiet power, but he had taught me integrity, patience, and strength. Even on that day, I noticed the subtle judgments. Adrian's mother barely acknowledged my father. Guests whispered, comparing him to a man who didn't belong here. Adrian caught my worried glance and kissed me, whispering, "We're building our kingdom. Don't let anyone else worry you." The mansion came next. It was breathtaking. White stone, soaring ceilings, golden chandeliers, and rooms that seemed to stretch endlessly. Adrian told me it was ours, built from his sweat and genius, and I believed it. I believed I had found my fairy tale. But fairy tales can turn to nightmares faster than you can blink, and mine began the moment I walked through that mansion's threshold. The first year of marriage felt like a dream wrapped in gold. I quit teaching just as Adrian suggested and spent my days learning the rhythm of our mansion, organizing rooms, hosting small gatherings, and trying to blend into his glamorous world. The staff was kind, almost like family. Maria, the housekeeper, always left little notes of encouragement. Ben, the gardener, would grin and tell me secrets about the roses that grew like magic in the backyard. They were my anchors, but the cracks started slowly. Little things at first, Adrian coming home late, claiming meetings ran long, phone calls taken behind closed doors, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. He started snapping over trivial mistakes. A dinner burned, you're careless. A misplaced document, how hard is it to stay organized? I brushed it off, convincing myself he was under pressure. Then Serena appeared. She wasn't just another consultant, she was like a shadow that followed Adrian everywhere. Blonde hair, perfectly tailored outfits, eyes that seemed to scan the room and find all weaknesses. The first time I saw her laugh at one of his jokes, I felt a strange twist in my chest. My intuition screamed, but my mind argued, she's just a professional. Soon, it wasn't just laughter. Their gestures were casual, intimate in a way that made the air between us thicken. Adrian stopped looking at me the way he used to. His touch vanished, his compliments dried up. Even the staff noticed. Maria would cast quick, pitying glances, and Ben, the kind old gardener, whispered warnings I didn't want to hear. Worse, I started finding receipts, hotel bookings, restaurant bills, places I had never been, dates I wasn't invited to. My blood ran cold the first time I saw a hotel envelope addressed to Serena, sent to our mansion. I realized then that I wasn't imagining things. Something was happening behind my back. I tried to confront him subtly. A question here, a comment there. Each time, Adrian's smile was perfect, calm, almost rehearsed. "You're being paranoid," he'd say. "You should trust me." But I couldn't. I began documenting everything secretly. Phone calls, receipts, notes, observations. A private investigator became my silent ally. And then came the day I walked into the library and saw them together. Serena leaning close, Adrian whispering, hands brushing. I froze, heart hammering. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but I did neither. I held my composure, knowing the real battle hadn't even begun. Because betrayal is never about the first crack, it's about how the foundation is broken. And my mansion, my life, my trust, were all trembling on the edge. It wasn't long before Serena stopped being just a consultant and started acting like she owned the place. She would appear in the kitchen uninvited, leaning on the marble counters, smiling at Adrian like she was his queen. My presence seemed to irritate her. At first, I tried to ignore it, convincing myself I was overreacting, but the staff began exchanging glances that said everything I didn't want to hear. One evening, I found her in the library, flipping through a book I had been reading for weeks. She smirked and said, This one's not really your style, is it? Her voice was smooth, like silk laced with venom. My chest tightened, a warning bell going off somewhere deep inside me. Adrian, of course, laughed, like it was a private joke, and I felt invisible. Adrian's behavior shifted too. He became controlling in subtle ways. Critiques that had once been rare turned into constant commentary. My wardrobe, my routines, even my interactions with staff were monitored. Every question I asked was met with a sigh, a dismissive glance, or a sharp remark. He began trusting Serena with matters that were once ours: finances, schedules, even invitations to events. The mansion itself started to feel foreign. Rooms I had decorated with care were rearranged without my knowledge. Personal items I treasured were moved or borrowed by Serena, who always returned them with a patronizing smile. Every corner seemed to whisper betrayal. I tried reasoning with Adrian. "She's just a consultant," I said, though my voice cracked. "She doesn't belong in our personal life." He shook his head. "You're overthinking this, Lena. She's helping with the company. Focus on being a good hostess. Don't make this about jealousy." But it wasn't jealousy. It was intuition. And intuition screamed louder every day. Then came the subtle sabotage. At a charity dinner I was hosting, Serena switched menus, misinformed the waitstaff, and made a casual comment about my dress in front of the guests that left me red-faced. Adrian didn't correct her. In fact, he smiled as if he enjoyed watching me squirm. It was becoming clear I wasn't just losing my marriage. I was losing my home, my dignity, and my voice. But I wasn't gonna disappear quietly. I began documenting every move, photographing receipts, recording conversations, keeping a detailed journal. Because every empire has cracks, and when the time came, I intended to pry them right open. Little did Adrian know, the mansion, the estate, the very world he thought he owned, wasn't truly his. And the moment he realized that would be closer than he ever imagined. The night Adrian chose to humiliate me was cold, sharp, and calculated. A charity gala at our mansion, one of the most anticipated events of the season, was the perfect stage. I had spent hours preparing, adjusting my gown, rehearsing my smile, making sure everything seemed flawless. I was the perfect hostess, unaware that I was about to be the perfect victim. Guests arrived, sparkling in designer dresses and tailored suits. Laughter floated through the grand halls, glasses clinking. I tried to focus, tried to remind myself that I was in control of my own dignity. But there was a tension in the air, a subtle whisper among the staff that I couldn't place at first. Then I saw her, Serena Vale, striding through the room, wearing my pearl necklace, the one Adrian had given me for our anniversary. My chest tightened, and for a second, I felt the panic that had been simmering for weeks boil over. She laughed softly as she passed by, like a predator flaunting her victory. Adrian noticed, of course, and his smirk made my stomach churn. Dinner began, but I couldn't eat. My eyes darted around, catching the silent glances of the staff, the whispers between guests. Adrian was behaving perfectly, as if orchestrating an invisible symphony of my humiliation. He topped off wine glasses, leaned close to Serena, laughed a little too loudly, and touched her arm in a way that made my hands shake. Then came the announcement. Adrian stood, clinking his glass with a fork. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. I took a deep breath, hoping it was a toast, a joke, anything but what was coming. "I have an announcement," he said, voice smooth and deliberate. "Lena, you are no longer welcome in my home." Time slowed. I couldn't breathe. Security appeared, moving like shadows, hands gripping my arms. "Excuse me, ma'am, please step aside." "No! Adrian, wait!" I yelled, but he didn't. He smiled at Serena, like the moment was his personal stage. Guests whispered, some gasped, others recording on their phones. The humiliation was exquisite, meticulously planned. I was dragged through the mansion, my suitcase barely holding my essentials. The rain had started outside, cold and relentless, soaking my dress, washing away any remnants of dignity. I stood on the curb, shivering, heart pounding, utterly powerless. And then my phone vibrated. A message from my father. Just one line. Come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. Bring nothing but yourself. For the first time since that betrayal began, a spark of hope flickered. I didn't know what my father was planning, but I knew this wasn't the end. Because every empire, no matter how grand, has its cracks, and Adrian had just stepped onto the edge of his downfall. The morning after the gala, I couldn't stop shivering, even under the thick blanket in my hotel room. My clothes were still damp from the rain, my hair a tangled mess, but I had one thought that kept me moving: my father. I arrived at Hale Estates headquarters at exactly 9 a.m., as instructed. The building looked ordinary from the outside, a modest structure tucked into the city's business district. But as soon as I stepped through the doors, the air shifted. A sleek interior, polished floors, and men and women moving with precise confidence. It wasn't the office of a typical property manager, as I had always assumed my father to be. "Lena," my father greeted me, calm and steady. His face held the same warm expression I'd always known, but his eyes had a glint I'd never seen before. "Come, we need to talk." We walked past rows of offices filled with staff carrying files and discussing deals in hushed tones. Finally, we entered a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a massive table covered with folders, contracts, and deeds. I blinked. What is all this?" I asked, voice shaking. He smiled faintly. "It's time you knew the truth." For the first time in my life, I realized I had underestimated my father. He wasn't just a humble man who had raised me alone. He was Henry Hale, one of the wealthiest real estate magnates in the state. He owned hundreds of properties, commercial buildings, luxury estates, and the mansion Adrian had thrown me out of was his. Every tile, every chandelier, every square inch. Adrian had been renting it for years, believing it was his own empire. I stared, speechless. My father handed me folders with property deeds, bank statements, and legal contracts. Each document confirmed the reality I could hardly comprehend. Adrian's office lease, owned by my father. His luxury car, financed by a company my father controlled. Every claim Adrian made about his wealth was a lie. Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, heart pounding. He placed a hand on mine. "Because of your mother," he said softly. "I wanted to see if he truly loved you, or just wanted what he thought you represented. 3 years. I gave him 3 years to prove himself. He failed." The shock was overwhelming, but beneath it, a flicker of something else emerged. Power, possibility, and the knowledge that Adrian had no idea his life was about to unravel. I clenched my fists. My father looked at me with quiet authority. "Tomorrow, Lena, we take back what's mine, everything." And in that moment, the weight of betrayal transformed into something else. Anticipation. Sweet, calculated, inevitable revenge. The next morning, I stepped into the conference room with a renewed sense of purpose. My father, calm as ever, had gathered a team of top lawyers, financial experts, and private investigators. The table was covered in documents, leases, contracts, financial statements, tax filings, all meticulously organized. Every detail of Adrian Wolf's life, every asset he claimed as his own, was accounted for. "Adrian's empire is built on lies," my father said, voice quiet but sharp, cutting through the tension in the room. "Fraud, misrepresentation, forgery. He's violated multiple contracts and has no legal claim over the mansion or his offices. Not to mention the shell companies he's been using to launder money from investments with Serena Vale." Serena's name hit me like a punch. That smug, calculating woman, the mastermind behind months of manipulation, had underestimated me. They both had. We started by reviewing the mansion lease. Adrian had been paying my father $20,000 a month under the guise of ownership. Every payment, every late fee, every minor violation was documented. Then came the commercial properties. Adrian's office at Harbor Center, his leased luxury vehicles, even his memberships at exclusive clubs. My father owned the entities behind all of them. The lawyers began drafting eviction notices, lease terminations, and formal claims of fraud. Every document was airtight. My father showed me the emails he had intersected, the falsified signatures Adrian had forged, and the tax discrepancies. The evidence painted a clear picture. Adrian had built a facade of wealth, completely dependent on the empire I had inherited without even knowing it. We didn't stop at legal documents. My father had coordinated with the authorities to ensure the enforcement of eviction notices and asset seizures would happen smoothly, leaving Adrian no room to maneuver. Every step was pre-planned, every eventuality accounted for. I listened, heart hammering, feeling a rush of vindication mixed with disbelief. The same man who had laughed as I was dragged to our own home, the man who had flaunted his mistress in front of everyone, was about to be stripped of everything. "Lena," my father said, his eyes meeting mine, "this isn't just about revenge. It's about justice, about teaching him that arrogance and cruelty have consequences." I nodded, a cold determination settling over me. I wasn't just reclaiming the mansion. I was reclaiming my dignity, my life, and the truth that Adrian had tried to bury. And as we finalized the strategy, I realized something terrifying for him. He had no idea how close he was to losing everything. The drive back to the mansion felt surreal. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy, filled with the scent of wet asphalt and roses from the garden. I sat in the back seat of my father's sleek black sedan, heart pounding, hands clenched in my lap. Beside me, he exuded calm authority, like a storm ready to break at the perfect moment. When we arrived at the gates, I paused for a brief moment. This place had been my prison and my dream all at once. I remembered the humiliation of the previous night, the laughter, the cameras, Adrian's cold smile, and now everything was about to change. The front door opened before we even rang the bell. Serena, in silk pajamas and a messy topknot, looked surprised but quickly masked it with a smug expression. "What do you want?" she sneered. "Come to beg?" My father stepped forward, calm and unshaken. "I'm here to see Adrian Wolfe." Adrian appeared at the top of the grand staircase, irritation etched across his face. "Lena, what is—" "Mr. Wolfe," my father interrupted smoothly. "These are your eviction notices." Adrian blinked, reaching for the papers. His confident facade faltered as he scanned the documents. His office leases, the mansion lease, the luxury car, everything was being repossessed. His jaw tightened, hands trembling. This is impossible," he stammered. "It's very possible," my father said quietly, ice in his voice. "You've been living on my properties under false pretenses. 2 months behind on rent, fraudulent claims, and now it ends." Serena's expression changed from smug amusement to panic. She took a step back, realizing for the first time that Adrian's empire was built on illusions. She glanced at me, then at the papers, and the mask slipped. You can't do this!" she shouted. "You underestimated everyone," her father said. "You thought arrogance and deceit were stronger than truth, but truth always catches up." Adrian's knees buckled. He clutched the stair railing, tears forming. "Lena, please, I can fix this. I made a mistake." I looked down at him, my voice calm and controlled. "You wanted me gone. Now I'm letting you go." Serena, realizing her part in his downfall, stormed upstairs, gathering her belongings, leaving him behind. For the first time, Adrian faced the weight of every lie, every betrayal. As my father and I walked through the halls, I felt a strange lightness. The mansion, once a place of pain, now felt like home again. We had reclaimed it, not just the property, but dignity, justice, and the power that had been mine all along. The weeks that followed were almost surreal. Adrian's downfall spread like wildfire. News outlets had a field day. Tech mogul evicted from rented mansion after throwing out life. Headlines mocked his arrogance, exposing his lies, his fraudulent claims, and the truth about his so-called empire. Investors pulled out, business partners abandoned him, and the companies he had built on lies began to crumble within days. I followed the news quietly from the comfort of the mansion, which now felt like mine again. I had my father by my side, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. Maria and Ben visited a few days later. Maria hugged me so tightly it brought tears to my eyes, whispering, "I've always known," but I couldn't speak. Ben, the gentle gardener, patted my shoulder and smiled, relief and pride in his eyes. My father had reinstated them both, with raises and new responsibilities. They were family in a way Adrian's staff never could be. Life slowly returned to normal, though in a version that felt richer than before. I moved back into the mansion, rearranging rooms to my taste.
adding small personal touches that reminded me of who I was before the betrayal. The laughter of staff, the scent of roses, the quiet hum of the fountains outside, all became symbols of renewal. I returned to teaching, but this time at prestigious private school. My name had changed back to Hale, and I used my story to inspire young women about resilience, strength, and dignity. I even started a foundation called Second Chances, dedicated to helping women recover from toxic relationships and rebuild their lives. Every letter, every call, every success story reminded me that even the darkest moments could be transformed into something powerful. Adrian? He had vanished into obscurity. Rumor had it he moved into a modest apartment across town, working in middle management, a shadow of the man he pretended to be. Serena, too, disappeared. Photos emerged weeks later of her with another wealthy man, her predatory grin intact, moving from one conquest to the next. Their empire of arrogance had crumbled, but my life, finally, was whole. And through it all, my father remained my constant. Sunday dinners in the garden, laughter among roses, and long walks through the mansion grounds reminded me that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it watches quietly, waiting for the right moment to defend what's truly important. That night, as I looked out over the estate from my restored bedroom, I realized something profound. The betrayal had taught me resilience, patience, and the quiet strength of knowing my worth. Adrian had underestimated me. He had underestimated my father, and in the end, he lost everything because he never saw the quiet force standing behind me. The mansion finally felt like home again, but this time it was different. The echoes of betrayal that once haunted the hallways had faded, replaced by calm, dignity, and a sense of justice fulfilled. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, rearranging flowers, opening windows to let in the fresh morning air. Every corner reminded me that power doesn't always roar. It can wait quietly, patiently, and then strike with precision. My father was the living embodiment of that lesson. The man I had always seen as humble, simple, and ordinary was a titan in disguise. He had watched, waited, and ensured that when the time came, every lie, every act of cruelty would be met with consequence. I understood then that true strength doesn't demand recognition. It simply acts when it matters most. Life returned to a rhythm I had long forgotten. Sunday dinners in the garden with Maria and Ben, the staff who had become family, filled the estate with laughter and warmth. I returned to teaching, sharing knowledge and life lessons with young women who needed to believe in themselves. Through the Second Chances Foundation, I reached hundreds of women who had faced betrayal and loss, showing them that dignity, patience, and resilience could rebuild even the most shattered lives. As for Adrian Wolfe, his name faded from the news, his empire in ruins, his confidence shattered. Serena Vale had vanished too, leaving behind a trail of arrogance unfulfilled. Their lives, built on manipulation and deceit, collapsed not through vengeance alone, but through the silent, careful power my father and I had wielded. Yet every so often, I catch a headline or a whisper about them, and a tiny part of me feels a shiver, not of fear, but of triumph. The world underestimated us, they underestimated me, and in the end, that was their downfall. I learned something invaluable through it all. The people who truly love you don't require you to prove your worth. The ones who matter will quietly stand by you, guide you, and protect you. And the people who try to control, humiliate, or destroy you, they will always meet their reckoning if patience and truth are on your side. So here's the truth I want to leave you with. Never underestimate someone based on appearances. The quiet ones, the seemingly ordinary, might just hold empires. They might just have the power to protect, to restore, and to change lives, including your own. I am Lena Hale. I survived betrayal. I reclaimed my life. And I discovered that the sweetest victories are not loud, they're absolute, measured, and unstoppable.